Okay, let's actually rewind a bit. Okay. If you remember, we have used array lists and all. In the array list, we were able to actually provide what data type we want to use as a part of that list, so that it only allows that particular data type. However, along with that kind of adding such protection, uh, we are also getting one more benefit out of this, out of doing something like this. That is, the code, whatever they write, will be generic for any data type. Okay, let's take a simple program. Let's say, let's create a class. In that, let's say there is an array. Now, we want to create a method called print array that can print this array. Okay. Now, let's create the definition of it, and let's write the actual logic. So how do we write it? So we write it in such a way that for int I equals to 0, I less than array dot length I plus plus sysouts, and we will be printing array of I. So now let's take this simple example. Okay, if we run this program will be running no issues, based on our experience as well as the code whatever we see. This particular program prints the array. Okay. Let's say I have now another array, string array. Now I want to, oh sorry, str array. Now I want to print this array. Now what I have to do? I have to create another method, or I have to create another method with the same logic, and now this will work because both are taking the different parameters. Now the same logic can be applied in both the cases. Print array, string array. Okay. Now we got printer, integer array printed, as well as the string array is also printed. But do you see a problem with this code? The problem is that the code is basically same. There is no change at all. Only change is the kind of data type that we are accepting. Okay, and even in the logic there is no change. But still, we have to copy paste that code and repeat it. Okay. So what are the other ways? We can actually create one method, like say for example, that accepts object and executes the same code. Now comment the code, entire code. Now if you see, because this is an integer array, we have to, let's imagine, let's this is object integer. Now if you see, there is a single method that is accepting both the types. Okay. So this may be looking like it's going to solve some of the problem also. Okay. But imagine that it has to return the same data type as what has been sent. Okay. So now let's say, for example, it has to return the first element. So if it has to return the first element, what we can say is we can say object and return array of or let's say we have to return the last element to just slightly more complicate things. Okay, now what it does, it will be returning this particular object, whatever that has been array that has come, it will be returning the last element of that array. Okay, it prints it and it returns the last element. So now this works for both of them. Okay, but the problem is this. The problem is when we are actually trying to say, for example, we know we are passing string array, but if I say, for example, string x equals to, okay, I'll not be able to, I'll be getting an error. Why? Because this is an object is what is getting returned. So I have to typecast it. Now let us see whether we got it correctly or not. Let's run the program. Okay, we got that last element correctly. So now do you see there is an extra step of casting whatever object is returned. Okay, and you have to know what type of data type that you are passing so that you can cast it. And now casting may not always be as simple as this. Let's say we have to return an array. Okay, so for example, we have to return all even objects, even elements of this array. So now what do we have to do? We have to create a new array. Say for example, the size of the new array would be if array dot length modulo 2 is double equals to 0, that is if it is even number, the size would be int size equals to 0 array dot length, else size equals to array dot length plus 1. I'm sorry, array dot length by 2. So now we can create a new array, but because we don't know which data type we are getting, we have to create an object array of size. And after at every even element, if I modulo 2 is double equals to 0, then we have to objects of I divided by 2 equals to array of I. So now let's say we have to return this new array of objects instead of one single element. Now objects, instead of object we are returning an object array. Now what happens? Now if we say for example string array like this, and if we try to convert like this, the conversion may not actually be accurate. Let's try to print and see what happens. Now, what it said is we cannot directly cast an object list, list of objects into a list of strings. Okay, What we have to do is we have to first take this as an object array and loop through all of these elements. I is less than x dot length I plus plus string new array equals to new string of x dot length. New array equals to, we have to then convert individual objects, individual objects to strings x of I. Now this will be giving us a new array. So now what happened is, because we are writing a code something like this, what's happening is we are restricted to get returning only object. Okay, if there are no other ways we can solve this problem. Okay, earlier cases where you had seen simple problem where we are printing and all, it's not a much big deal if we are just simply giving the data type that we are actually going to pass as input. Okay, if we use object, it's going to take all, but if we have to return an object, then the problem will be starting to get more and more complicated. Okay, so if we don't want to create like this, okay, the only way that we can do is create two different methods, one that accepts integer and one that accepts string. So here, instead of object array, we will be accepting integer array, and we will be returning an integer array. And here we will be taking string array, and then we will be returning string array. And here, because it's only for integers, we can actually integer. And now here also we can change it to string string. Okay, and even the return type is also string. Now if you see, we don't need this. Okay, we can directly create a so we can directly call that method in one single line. We will be printing that array and we will be getting back the elements at the even places of that particular array. Now if we run the program, everything works fine. Okay. But now we are again back to the initial problem only. Okay, so now it is printing just the address of it. If you want to print all of the elements of an array, you have to, for string element x, print element. So now it printed Srinivas and Buddha, which are at even elements, so like 0 and 2. But now we are back to the square problem, that having to repeat the same logic two times. Okay, now if you see, everything is same except for these data types. Don't you think so? This is integer. Because this is integer, this also becomes integer, and because of that, this becomes integer, and well as this becomes integer. So if you see, everywhere we are using integers here in this, and now in here we are using string. So all these four places we are using string, just because we want to give simplicity for the users whoever is using this particular method. We have to repeat that code. Imagine tomorrow your requirement changes that you should not actually return elements at even places. You have to change it, return the elements at odd places. Now what you do, you change, you come to every method that you have copied that code, and you have to change that code. Now this presents a problem. The problem is that sometimes we may forget, and some developers may not know that they have to modify X, Y, Z methods. They only think that it is enough if they modify X method and forget to do Y, Z. So what happens in that case is obviously we are going to get more and more bugs into our program. Okay, so which is not so desirable. So Java in 1.5 they have introduced a new concept called as generics. Okay, so generics is a concept. It's an abstract concept using which we can actually write programs or methods or even classes that will work for multiple data types. Okay, not by mentioning the objects, but by delaying the data type that we are going to use for a certain method. Okay, so at the time of writing the program, so at the time of writing a program, what we will do is we will not be actually mentioning any type. Okay, we'll be delaying the data type definition for a specific thing. So what we do is we create a custom data type. Let's say E. Okay, and then what this does is this creates a new data type, and this data type will take the actual form at the time of runtime. Okay, at compile time it will not take any exact specific type implementation. Now what is that we are going to get by mentioning something like this? We are going to actually, we don't have to mention these data types anymore. And here also E, here also E. Just give me a second. Let me search as to why generic array creation is giving an error. Generic array creation. Okay, so sorry, I forgot at the time while I'm writing. So we cannot directly create a generic object like that, or generic array like that. What we have to do is we have to create an object array and then cast it into a generic data type. Okay, we cannot actually directly create a generic array like that. Or you can even better it, we can use array list or something that will be accepting this data type, so that we will not have this kind of issue also. But anyways, now, what I did is I have actually commented the other method, that is accepting the string specific logic. And now if you see, the same logic is applicable for both integer as well as uh, string. Okay. Now the data type of which data type has to be used in place of e will be decided at runtime. Okay. And the when we are calling this method, that e will be resolved as an integer. So all four of these places, it becomes an integer array. And at the time of running line number 20, the e will be changed to transformed into string. So the same logic works for that also. Now if I run this program, let us use something called as list over here. List e, list, and so array list. I have to use new here. And because these have to be imported, java.util.arraylist, java.util.list have been imported, and all we have to do is objects dot add array of I. So now this is actually list, and while returning we can actually convert list to array of type e dot. Okay, because we don't have e kind of data type, we will have to write a logic in such a way that it will be returning this. Okay. So we can return directly the list itself like this. Okay. Now what actually has happened over here is uh, the arrays, using arrays when it comes to creating generic types has some limitations as to what all we can do. So if we are using the list, we will be able to get the same advantage by actually using a custom data type. And now because this is a string array, and now we can actually create it like this. Okay. Now what we will be getting is we'll be getting the same advantage of having a single line of single method that actually replaces, that actually performs the operation same way for both list array, string array as well as an integer array. Okay, so if we run the program, we should be able to see Money and Kishore, which are at odd places, because we just changed that to odd places, we will be able to achieve. Okay, and now so this is how we can actually create a generic method. How? By actually delaying specifying any specific data type. Okay, we are creating a custom data type by using something called a generic form, and this particular data type will be used when we are actually running the program. At the time of actually the program is getting executed, that is when the actual type will be decided. So this is called as generic programming. Okay, we can also create, and now if you see this method, the creation of list and all, they are actually when object is getting created itself, they are taking a specific data type. Okay, and how do we create classes that actually restrict certain data type only? So how is like this, we will create our list. So finish, and here what we do is, sorry, okay, so we mention a type like this. Okay, it can be E or T or whatever you want. Okay, these are just conventions. Class level, the data type, the generic data type that we are defining at class level, we generally put them as T, and whereas the generic variables that we are data type that we are defining at method level, we generally put them as E. That is just a convention, not something that you have to follow mandatorily. And now, so what we did, we have actually created a specific data type. Now what we can actually do is we can use this data type everywhere. Public, say for example, void method 1, and this accepts t and x, and let's assume it does something with the t. It doesn't matter. Public void, or it can even return t, method 2. Let's say this takes two arguments of t, and this is it. Okay, and because it has to return a t, return, for now let's simply return null, so that the problem will be simpler to understand. Now if you, now what we did is all these methods will work on these things. Okay, and now let's say whenever we pass to data types, let's imagine that we will have to one single value, that let's say we have to print it. So s out, let's say we are printing x, and here let's say we have to concatenate both x and y. Okay, because the data type is not known, we cannot actually use like this. Okay, so let's say we have to concatenate both of them together. So now what we can actually do is we can call toStrings methods, and then call toString method on this, which will be concatenating both of them. And because we are returning a string here, we will have to return a string data type. Okay, because t plus t, whether it returns a data type of t or not, we don't know actually, because at the time of writing this program we are not aware of what it does. Okay, let's say instead of returning, if it simply has to print, that's okay. There won't be any problem also. Okay, we can also define t like this. Let's say we want to return one element of them. Okay, now this is how we are actually creating a generic class. Now what happens, what is the advantage of what we are going to get by doing like this is, where is this? Now at the time of creating the object, say for example our list, we have to mention which data type it's going to accept. Sorry, this is our list. Okay, now if I type l dot method 1, now if you see, it is telling that it is going to accept string, and method 2 it's telling it is going to accept string and string. Now if we change the same thing to integer, now if I type m, now if you see, method 1 is accepting integer and method 2 is accepting integers, two integers. Now if you see, what happened over here is the same logic will work for both, not both. Okay, it can act for any type of data type. Okay, so
Buddha, is there any prompt message that is getting displayed? I mean, whatever you're reading, that is
uh, you are not seeing the
like
IntelliSense.
no.
Okay, IntelliSense may not be visible. Let me just a moment. Now if you see L dot, if I say method 1, you would see that integer, it is accepting integer, and method 2 is accepting two integers. Okay, and the same way if you are actually changing this data type from integer to string, and now at the time of this writing this method, now these are inferred as strings. Okay, so these are just late inference. Okay, so at the time of writing these methods, we have written them so that we don't have to duplicate the code, because of which we have actually created a custom data type for now, for temporarily, and then we have used that data type. Okay, and based on whatever data type that has been given at the time of creation of the array, creation of that object, that all the subsequent data types will be defined. Okay, if we have two different data types, we can define like this. Okay, and we may be able to accept that extra data type also. And because we are returning t, we cannot return y here. So let's say let's return x, and that will solve the problem. Now if you see, this class, while creation of the object defines two generic data types, so we will have to define two generic data types, integer. Okay, and now here also we have to mention integer. Now if we say l dot method, now if you see, it is accepting one string and integer. So all these inference will be delayed until they are revealed. Okay, the actual objects, whenever they are created, they'll be created with these two also in place. So whatever operations that we want to do on these things, we will be able to do. So, and because we created a string integer, okay, if we had created as double and integer, we will be. And in Java 7, we don't really have to mention these data types here also. We can simply mention this diamond operator, and we can leave it at that, so that if we change here, we don't have to change here also. Now if we say L dot method 1, it's accepting first double, and then L method 2 is accepting double and integer. And also it is the what is it telling, it is going to return, it is telling it is going to return a data type called as double. Okay, so this is how we can actually create generic methods that work for different data types. Okay? So we don't have to have a clumsy code of repeating the same copy pasting the same code to achieve the same purpose, for just because we have to do it for a different data type. Okay, so the lists and array lists are also defined like that only. Now if we open the code of list, now you would see that here, while creating the list interface, they created a data type called as e, and that data type is something that will be used across the uh, code. Okay, now see iteratory. If you open the code of array list, here also you should be seeing same. See ArrayList E. Okay, and ArrayList has a method called as add. Just looking for that method. Now if you see, the set method is actually using that E data type, whatever is defined. At index I, that particular element will be replacing the existing element. Okay, so add also is accepting E. It is not accepting integer or string. But now when we actually use this, that particular object will be referred, sorry, that particular data type will be this e will be transformed into whatever data type that we define when we are creating the object of this array list. Okay, so this is called as generic programming. Okay, in Java, most of the times you may not have to create generic classes and all, but you never know, depending upon the experience that they are expecting from you, you may have to create also. So make sure that you are actually creating all these things. Okay, now we can actually put some restrictions. Okay, let's say we want to create a list of games in our unscrambler program. Okay, we want to create a class that will take that will accept only classes that are extending from game. Okay, let's say, let's define a class like that. Okay, now if we say for example t and write all the methods, yeah, we can write. But what happens is, in the main method we can actually create a game lister object, and we can pass anything. Okay, L equals to new game lister. Okay, we can pass anything. Okay, but this is not the intention of this game lister, right? It only has to extend, sorry, it only has to have a accept only the data types that are of game type. Okay, either it can be game or it can be the child classes of game, that is fiery fingers and Silver. So now in that case, how do we actually restrict user from uh, only giving certain data types? Okay, we can restrict in such a way that he extends game. Okay, now what happens is, whatever data type that user provides, he has to provide a data type that is only extending from game. Now if we go to our main method, this particular thing will be returning an error. Okay. And either we have to use a game data type or the child data types that are actually uh, extending from game. Okay, the same way we can give put lot of such restrictions, like it can be extends or it can be implements, where we give a specific interface, so that way we will be actually uh, uh, restrict what all comes to a data type. Okay, if we say list, what is the error? Expected. Uh, I don't have any interfaces at this point of time, so I'm unable to show. But if we have an interface, all we have to do is can simply say implements, and that's when it will be restricting only in classes that are implementing a specific interface. Okay, so that is how we can actually restrict what goes in. Okay, sometimes we cannot accept everything. Our code we may not be able to write a code that works for everything that user may throw at us. Okay, so in those cases, what we will do is we will be restricting that. Okay, I can do it for multiple things, but not for everything. Okay, only I can only do it for things like X, Y, Z. Okay, so that is why we use all these kinds of constraints when we are actually creating the generic classes or even methods. Okay, so that is how we can actually create the generic classes. Okay, so do you guys have any questions?
Mm, no, Buddha.
Okay. So I'm not giving any specific assignment on this. Just try to create a game lister class, whatever that we created, and try to create some imaginary methods, whatever that you may like. Okay. You can even just go through how array list and list are working, so that you will get an idea of how they are created. Okay. So tomorrow as it's Wednesday, we cannot have tomorrow. Sorry, Thursday, we cannot have tomorrow. We'll have the next session on Friday. Okay, and that with that session, I'll be closing up the core Java part. Okay, so immediately we'll go. So either of you have any exposure to the database?
Yes, I'm having exposure to database.
Okay. So which database you work with? If it is mainframe, you may have worked with the DB2.
Yeah, in mainframe we work on DB2, and in Unix we work on Oracle.
Okay. So if you are already aware of database queries and all, I don't have to spend much time on uh, this. What much time? I don't have to spend so much time on the actual SQL part. We can directly jump into the part of Hibernate once I just introduce you. to some topics that are necessary. Okay. So either of you ever worked with something called as MySQL, MySQL?
Yeah, I work with it.
Okay. Okay. It will be much quicker, so I don't have to spend so much time on database per se. So we'll go through some basic refresher course kind of thing on database. How about you, Kishore? You have exposure to database SQLs?
I mean, I have exposure to DB2 and SQL queries.
Okay, that is
Not
enough. That is enough. So like it will be most of 99%, 95% of the time the queries, SQL queries for DB2 and MySQL are same. There will be small variations, but we don't really have to worry about that at this point. Okay, so fine. We'll meet you on Friday. Just to practice some of the things that I showed you today.